point of order from Edmonton Centre. I believe you had one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I raised the point of order toward the end of the exchange between the Minister of Municipal Affairs and myself. In fact, it was, I believe, during the additional offering he made. And I was a bit surprised because I was expecting a bit of a retraction or an explanation of why he would say such things against people who live in rural Alberta, putting out that they somehow didn't carry their share of the workload and didn't deserve to have any share of the money. But no, in fact, he got up and kept swinging. Or kept digging, I'm not sure which. So under 23H motives, 23H making allegations against another member, he did go on at a certain point, and again, you have the benefit of the blues, I don't, to say that I and members of my caucus didn't give a hoot about rural Alberta and didn't understand them, etc., etc. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is clearly a comment that is meant to inflame. It is meant to create debate in this House. It was meant to demean. I think it was quite pointed. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact of how proud I am of my constituents living in the fabulous constituency of Edmonton Centre, most of whom do live in high-rise buildings, in condominiums and apartments. So, you know, it wasn't hard to understand that this was a direct insult to me and to the people that I represent. Not acceptable to me, Mr. Speaker. I can... You know, sticks and stones will break my bones, and I've taken a heck of a lot of that from the other side. But don't you go dissing my constituents. And that's what went on here. So, a point of order is raised against an individual member in this House, and I understand that. I would not be quite so exercised about this if it was just another shot at me, because, as I said, I've had a lot of them, and I'm still standing. Must annoy the heck out of you guys. So the minister did utter words that were meant to create a disturbance. They were meant to inflame a discussion. They were meant to demean. They were meant as an allegation that we didn't care about rural people who reside in rural Alberta. And that's simply not true. Now, if the Speaker would like and would give me a bit of time, I can go back and start pulling the debates, because I talk a lot in this Assembly. I can start pulling the debates where I have brought forward issues of concern to people in rural Alberta, where I've received letters from them, where I've raised issues that they wanted me to raise in this House. So I believe that what the Minister has said is both untrue, but was intended to be insulting. And for that reason, and I know that the Speaker is very fond of quoting 494 and saying, well, you know, both of you can say something true at the same time. And with respect, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that that fits the bill in this case. It was meant to be insulting to me and my constituents, and it was meant to demean, and it was meant to put me in a position where myself and my caucus members were being put out to Albertans that somehow we didn't care about those that reside in rural Alberta, and that's simply not true. There's no compelling argument coming from him that would make me believe that it was, or make anyone else believe that it was. So I would like that member to retract that statement, please.
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before that, and I specifically wrote it down because it's stuck in my head when the question came before I responded and made those comments, Mr. Speaker, and the quote was, not a fan of the cities, Mr. Speaker. I was accused of not being a fan of the cities, Mr. Speaker. I've lived part-time in the city since I've been an MLA, because as a rural MLA, you know yourself, you live, not yourself, but previous Speaker did, half the time in the country and half the time in the city because we work here. And I'm more acutely aware, I think, as many of my rural colleagues know the challenges. I did not interrupt you. more acutely know the challenges that go on in rural Alberta and in urban Alberta because we spend half of our time in both places, Mr. Speaker. I have worked very hard with every single municipality from Fort Macleod to Fort McMurray, from Edmonton to Edgerton, and from Calgary to Cold Lake, Mr. Speaker. I've been to 328 different municipalities in this province and met with the councils and talked to them over the 11 years as an MLA, Mr. Speaker. And all I meant to point out was that, and I know that the honourable member said, don't go dissing my constituents, Mr. Speaker. Well, rural Alberta are my constituents too. And I get very frustrated when anyone suggests that, oh, rural Alberta has money, we need to pull it out and put it into the cities. Because, and as I explained, a rural Albertan will stand up and say, we're the ones that drive the economy. You guys get all the breaks and you get fantastic schools and you get all sorts of facilities while we sit out in rural Alberta and drive the economy. And they're just as frustrated sometimes, Mr. Speaker, by the discrepancy that goes on, and they feel they over-contribute and get less back. Just as a member pointed out, that right now she feels that urban Albertans get less back than what they contribute, Mr. Speaker. Every single jurisdiction, if I go to Fort McMurray, they say they drive the economy. If I go to an agricultural district like Brooks, they say, well, we employ a lot of people and drive the economy. Every single place in this province, Mr. Speaker, contributes to the economy and probably feels like they don't get as much back. But we have limited resources, Mr. Speaker. But any time we start off with a question that says they have more, let's take it, creates an us versus them atmosphere. And I have no patience for us versus them. Edmonton and Edgerton, Calgary and Cold Lake are just as entitled to resources as anybody else. And it's not about who has more, Mr. Speaker, because as many colleagues will attest, you don't make yourself richer by stealing from somebody else. We're all in this together. We're all Albertans. Every single community deserves the resources available to try and build itself up, to make itself stronger, so we have a stronger Alberta, Mr. Speaker. I know the member got emotional and said, don't you go dissing my constituency. She also said, I'm not a fan of the cities, which I take exception to. I also took exception to the fact that it sounded like she was trying to steal resources from rural Alberta. I'm not a fan of that either, Mr. Speaker, so I got defensive. But I didn't say anything different than this member did on any plane.
Heard enough. Thank you. You know, it just illustrates the point here that clarifications are sometimes absolutely necessary. We've heard from Edmonton Centre where she stands on this issue. We've heard from the Minister of Municipal Affairs where he stands. And I'm grateful for the clarification. And just for the record, I lived in 4 different locations in rural Alberta over almost 15 years, so I get a pretty good feel for what urban and rural life is like. And I, like every single member here, appreciates both, because that's what's made this province so strong. Let's keep it at that high level. Thank you.